Also sharing my screen. So today we are reviewing free text requisitions. And a lot of obviously stuff goes into free text requisitions. It's kind of the catch-all bucket for all of our different requests, right? And requests can come over for SPOs, for bids, for services, for item purchase, all kinds of things end up in the bucket. So we're going to go over just some basic kinds that you're going to see, as well as kind of what, as buyers, what our responsibilities are when it comes to these free texts, okay? And so each one of us has in Coupa, under the requisitions tab, each one of us has a by property created view for pending buyer action. Today, I'm actually looking at requiring action, which is the same thing. It just doesn't have any filters on it. So these are all of the requisitions across the company that are now sitting in buyer action. We're in test today, if you can't tell, hence the purple. But we're just going to start with a couple one of these. So as you can see, there's all kinds of dollar values here, all kinds of actions could be taken. We don't necessarily know, right, what we're going to get in this queue. It's kind of a catch-all for everything that's not cataloged or punch out or corporates doing it for us, right? So this is like kind of a lot of different things. So it's really important. The first step when you're taking buyer action is to stop and think. First piece of advice I can give you. This is not a queue that you can just whip through quickly, okay? All of these take different actions. All of them are going to be slightly different from each other because you're dealing with different vendors, different users, different scenarios, all that stuff. So up here are the examples we're going to go over today. These are not the only examples that happen. We're not going to go into a bunch of details about how to build SPOs. We will briefly go over SPOs. We're also not going to go into a lot of detail about how to build a sourcing event, but I'm at least going to show you guys how to get a requisition from the queue to a sourcing event. And then 2 weeks from now, we're actually going to take that same item and do a sourcing event with it. And we're going to go over sourcing events 2 weeks from today. But today is all about the queue. So the first example we have here is a request for the steakhouse, and it's for a couple of different scotches. So this probably seems pretty upfront, but there's a few things that just make me pause for a second. And it doesn't necessarily mean I have to take a huge amount of time to review this, but I am going to come and start the review process by hitting edit. And then it's going to take me, because I'm a buyer, into this requisition because it's pending action, and I'm able to take action on this. Now, what action am I taking? So a couple of things I do need to check for is the address correct, right? Is this going to be delivered to the property? Are we picking it up? Are we shipping it to a third party? All of those things are things I need to keep in mind as I'm reviewing the requisition, because this affects where the supplier is going to send it, the record of where it went, potentially the tax rate that we pay, right? That's all very important. So we need to make sure that that's correct as we get through reviewing. The departments, we're going to trust that our end user knows what department this should be delivered to and what property this should be charged to. If it's weird, by all means, question your end user and be like, hey, this seems a little odd. What's going on? Deposits, capital, and CRF, we just want to make sure. Most of what we're going to see in the queue, obviously, all of these are no. But as we go through and get more information about this, right, we want to make sure these are correct. Okay. So as I scroll down, I'm going to finally get to my items. So first things first, it's telling me a couple things are required. Okay. So those are obviously things I have to take care of. So I can update things in bulk here, or I can click in the item. To assign supplier, you do have to click in the item. So I'm going to click in the item and I am going to assign a supplier. I know where we get this. I'm going to assign the supplier. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I could just release this without a backing document and send it. But if I did that, I would not actually be performing the whole buyer action. Okay. The first thing after I do the supplier is this description is not correct. Does it tell me what it is? Yeah. Does it match the description that we put on item request forms? No. So I need to fix it. Every item that you buy, every item that we buy that makes it to a PO, that makes it to a receipt, that makes it on an invoice, should be formatted as close to the same way that we format our catalogs. And that helps us with data review. It helps us pull information so we know what's being purchased regularly so we can make our own catalogs. It helps our sourcing teams pull information so they can help us manage and make catalogs and source new commodities for us. This is a huge step. Could I leave it like this? Yes. Should I leave it like this? Absolutely not. So I am going to kind of complete this the same way I would if I were filling out an item request form. I'm going to fill it out in the same way. So I'm going to put Scotch. I'm going to leave the brand. I'm going to leave the year. I'm going to make sure that we know it's a 750 milliliter bottle and that it's an each or a bottle, right? Because we need to know how many are we buying. The vendor, the person's asking for a case. So how many are in a case? 12, 6, right? So we need to make sure that we are completing this in the same way that we would do an item request form, okay? So once we complete the description, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to make sure we're using a correct unit of measure. I'm going to make sure either case is fine. That's just a personal preference for me. As you can tell, I just do it automatically now. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to correct the price because that's the price I got from my supplier. I'm going to fill out my supplier's part number. They all have part numbers. All of them do. You can see them on their invoices. Don't believe them if they say they don't. This is preset information I'm going to leave. I'm going to make sure my need by date makes sense. So in this case, I happen to know as a buyer, like I should, that if I process this today, it doesn't matter if it gets approved today because Southern isn't going to deliver till next Wednesday anyway. So I'm going to change the need by date to Southern. If I think for some reason that this needs to be an emergency order and I need to contact my end user, ask your end user, hey, I noticed you had tomorrow. Is this something you need by tomorrow, or can this be included in the normal delivery next week? Make sure it's updated correctly. In this case, because this is an item that they potentially are going to buy repeatedly, even if there was a catalog here or a contract loaded, I am not going to attach a free text item to a catalog contract. Ever, 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 ever. If this item should be in the catalog, I'm going to do an item request and get it added to the catalog. I am not going to attach a free text to a catalog backing document. The reason I'm not going to do that is because this then becomes semi-cataloged, meaning my end user can go back and copy this requisition till the end of time with 0 updates and 0 procurement oversight, and it will automatically bring in that backing document and issue to the supplier. That is what catalogs are for, not free text. So keep that in mind. Also, as you're reviewing this, the item itself, how many times have you seen it? How many times have you processed a free text? Should this be a catalog item? The idea behind catalogs is to make us an efficient procurement organization, meaning that if this is a sole source item, you can't buy Scotch from anyone but this vendor, and they're going to buy it more than once a year, right? Or more than once every 5 years, this should probably be cataloged so that it does not come back to buyer action. Once I've done all of that review, I'm going to hit save. And I am now done with this item. I'm going to perform the exact same actions with every item on this requisition. Okay. Now, it could be said that this is actually a catalog item. What if this is a catalog item? Okay. I can actually pull in the catalog. I can pull in the catalog, maybe. We're going to see if I can pull it in. Man, I'm having a bad day today. So if it's a catalog item, you're basically going to start typing the item. And as it brings it up, you're going to select from your existing catalog. Okay, so that's really important in terms of when you're reviewing these items. It's not just a matter of getting the right information in the system, but also, does this already exist in a catalog somewhere? Should this be a catalog item instead of a free text? You can do a couple of different things. You can delete this and tell your end user, like, hey, this should be on a catalog. I've removed it from your free text. Please place the order through the catalog. You can send the whole order back and say, hey, one of these should be a catalog item. Please correct. You can correct it here. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm replacing scotch with beer, I think. Just so I can like get this done. Man, I'm having such a hard time with tests today. Can you guys tell? Okay. We're just going to pick that because apparently I can't literally pick anything else. And so just so you know, this is kind of how you can pick catalog items and assign. This is clearly not what the scotch we were looking for, which is catalog, by the way. And I'm going to make sure all of the catalog information should pull in. So I'm going to make sure that works. I'm going to make sure the need by date is updated, just like we talked about. If I'm processing this and it needs to be the right delivery date, I'm going to release this without a backing document. The catalog will automatically pull in that information later. So like, I don't necessarily need to attach them because I pulled in the catalog item. It'll happen later on. Once I'm done with all that, this is when I will send to the next approver. So that's a very basic free text requisition, but you guys saw I didn't just release. I didn't just go in and like tie it to a contract, right? That is not the buyer action. The buyer action is actually thinking about the source, where it should come from, the data going into the system, what the pricing should be, what the supplier number should be, what day are we supposed to get this? Like all of those things go into reviewing a free text. So that's first example. Second example is this wonderful requisition here from facilities. And this is a ballast, and they're asking for this from Centralized Electric Supply Co. And so what I did, I thought, man, that seems weird. I wonder if this is available through any of our national contracts. Voss, Granger, Fastenal. And I went and I discovered that this is in fact available through Voss. And this should have been placed through a quote through the punch out. So I'm going to edit. I don't necessarily have to review anything else on this rec because I already know that this is not where we're buying it from. And since I cannot take an existing rec and link it back to a punch out, I have to send this back to Denny and tell him this should be placed through a punch out. So please, I can put it in buyer notes. Right? I can make it fun. I can also tag him here. This will show up in the rec history. This, if you tag Denny, will actually prompt him if he has his notifications on. Totally up to you how you get the information back. Both of these can work. But in this case, I'm returning the requisition. And I'm going to say this should have been done through the punch out. Please place it through the punch out. Okay. So that's another type of thing. Notice, still a buyer action. I did something with it, but I was thinking when I reviewed it, like, this is definitely one of those commodities that we have under national programs. Why are we buying it from this supplier? Okay, should we be buying it from this supplier? That's part of when you are reviewing the queue. That's part of the thought process that we have to go through. The third example is this auto door closer repair. So it's in a single, so we're gonna double check, right? We're gonna start at the top, address, make sure we know who we're dealing with, look at the deposits and capital are all no. Does that make sense? Yes. So I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna edit this. And when I do look at this, it's really important. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go, okay, auto, I don't know the supplier. Oh, but they have a quote here. I'm going to look, man, they filled out a bunch of information. Wait a minute. Supplier part number, invoice. We do not cut purchase orders after the fact. This was already sourced, approved, completed. There is no reason for this to come to buyers. We add zero value here. It can be invoiced as a non-PO. There is no reason for us to process. And I return a requisition. So notice a totally different reason. And if I wasn't paying attention, I probably would have processed this, right? There's a document attached. I can look at the details, like, let's do it. The simple fact is that the value kind of doesn't even matter. Whether we have to bid it, whether we don't have to bid it, things happening in a specific order help all of us stay on the same page. So obviously this invoice was issued prior to the PO being cut, meaning the PO is not on the invoice. So that is going to be a manual piece of effort by an AP person to put the PO on the invoice. Okay. That is going to be manual effort to get the invoice to accounts payable, to get it manually entered in the system. It is a lot harder to get people on board with e-invoicing if they don't have purchase orders up front so they know where to invoice their stuff to. So same process, but a different reason why. So kind of emphasizing the thought that you go through when you're looking at these, and the review process is very important. The next example we have is an SPO. Okay, so this is to the printer. This is a corporate contract. This is a corporate initiative. And I know that it is. There's a contract loaded in the system from corporate. I am going to come and edit this. So there's a couple things. I'm going to do kind of the same thing here. Mail, printing, and production services. Are these going to come to the property? No, they're not. All of this stuff is going to be mailed to our guests. So the address is not correct. We're not actually shipping any of this stuff to this address. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make sure that I pick another address. So there's a couple different options if you're not shipping to your property. Okay. The first one is will call. This is really important for like facilities, food and beverage, when they're going to pick things up from suppliers. This is a great thing because this not only helps us know that the tax rate has changed in some jurisdictions, but it also helps us understand who should be receiving this. If it goes to will call and your end user picks it up, the doc is not receiving this. Your end user should. So down the line, right, we're clearing those misconceptions and that misinformation to help us clear potential pending receipts. The second one is comments. Okay. So comments are basically an address. There's no in in Coupa Live, there's actually no address listed here, just to keep everyone on the same page. It literally just says see comments, see comments, see comments. And then you're actually going to put a comment to say mailers are sent directly to guest homes. And this way, what do we know? We know that the warehouse is not going to be receiving this. This is something that does not come to property, and it's going to be received by the end user. This also helps us understand different tax rates, right? If that's applicable. This should be selected as an SPO. It's not, so I'm going to fix it. Deposits and capital, nope. CRF, nope. Double checking that, and then I'm going to come down here. So the format of an SPO is very important. We've talked about that a couple times. We actually had a whole video about it a couple weeks ago about the multiple different ways that you are formatting SPOs, or we need to format SPOs. So one thing to keep in mind here is, because we know this is a national contract, and I'm betting money that there are more POs out there for this company, I'm going to go and look at those POs. What are they formatted like, right? Because if we're all formatting POs the same, it's going to make e-invoicing for that supplier or AP that much easier. The second thing I'm going to look at, SPO for the Printer Inc. 2021. If it has a contract, regardless if it's property or corporate, the SPO needs to be written to go through the life of that contract, not annually. So the 2021 needs to go away because it's not just for the year. It's actually going to go through. Oh, Lord, I didn't mean to do that. Of course, the drop down would work now. So I'm going to delete that. The second thing is the unit price. So it looks like this was entered just for a shorter amount of time, not for the whole contract. So I'm going to need to work with my end user and be like, hey, this is how we enter SPOs. Specifically, because this is a contract, we are going to issue this for the life of your agreement so that there is one billing document for the life of your contract. We're going to increase this to the right amount because it's important. Supplier part number. Does one exist? More than likely not one, because it is multiple things being charged to this line with multiple invoices for multiple years. We're just going to write printing services. Now, the item number, let's talk about this for a second. SPO, the Printer Inc. Does SPO need to be in this description? No. We have this cool new button that we can designate SPOs with. So in this, I'm going to write printing and mailer services. Now, this kind of tells me what this is. It tells me what should be included here. It gives me a hint as to what this SPO is actually for. I'm going to change the date to where it actually goes through the end of the contract. And then the backing document. So it's really important to understand, do I have to load the contract that goes with this under my property? So do I have to actually sit down, take this contract and load it as a Argosy contract or whatever property? I don't even know what property this is for. No, I do not. So if there is a pen agreement loaded and your property is a part of that agreement, please, under no circumstances, load the agreement twice. Right? The whole point of the contract repository is for us to be able to track contract spend, as well as keep managing our contracts so we know when they expire, we know what's going on. So in this particular case, since this is a corporate contract, this is not a property contract. I don't want to load the same agreement in Coupa twice, because that's not going to allow me to track all the spend to the right contract. So I am going to pick the pen contract and I'm going to hit save. So notice all the different things that I updated and double checked and asked myself. That is what happens when you get a request like this. Okay, maybe your end user requested it and they were like, oh, I just need to pay January. And you're like, that's neat. That's not how this works. we're going to do you an SPO, and that way you don't have to keep submitting free text every month. It's going to be awesome. Okay. So once we're done, we're going to send to next approver. The next example is this wonderful repair for some broken signs. So this is just a one-off repair. It's not contracted. We don't really use this company very often. So what are we going to do? We are going to review the quote and make sure, oh, I'm in test, sorry. We are going to review the quote, read it, make sure we understand what's going on. In this particular case, you can see the repair and labor is under one line. Now, in some jurisdictions, in some areas of the country, labor is taxed differently than repairs. Okay, so it is very important to have two different lines when you can, because we do pay a different rate. Is the repair going to happen on property? Check the address. Is it an SPO? No. Do we have to pay deposits? No. I found all that out from looking at the quote. When I come down here, I'm actually going to copy this line and I'm going to create two lines, one for labor, one for repairs. The reason is because I will pay a different tax rate for parts than I will labor. So I'm going to write labor to repair neon signs. Quoted, not to exceed. Okay, so that tells me that the vendor told me it was not going to exceed this amount. That helps me and helps our end users when we're reviewing invoices for variances, right? So if I get an invoice that's going to charge me a bunch more, or if I get a pending receipt for $4,000 here, I'm going to know that's wrong because they told me it wasn't going to cost more than this. Okay, gosh darn it. You guys, I can't believe I just did that again. So I'm going to labor for sign repair, not to exceed. And then I'm going to make sure that the amount of labor listed on the quote is correct here. When it's going to be performed or by the date it should be finished, this could be an estimate. Since I don't have a contract, this is without a backing document, and I'm going to hit save. Now, I did forget something. Notice I didn't have a part number. So part numbers are really important because they help us. That's a data point when we're pulling data. So I am just going to write repair labor. Pretty simple, not crazy. This can kind of be anything just to give it some information. So when we are looking at that information, we know that it's not completely undone, right? Any information we can put into the system that helps us understand where we're spending our money is always helpful. Now this one, I'm just going to change it real fast and I'm going to be like repairs. So we're going to do parts for neon sign repair, not to exceed. And then I'm going to change this to the right amount, make sure the date matches, hit, oh man, release without backing document. Hopefully that worked. It didn't. And then now that I'm done and I've gone through and done all that review, that is when I release the backing document. And it goes to the next approver. The last one is what happens when we get a bid request. So this is a good example. It's already been sent to a sourcing event, but I'm going to show you guys how to do it anyway. So she just wants some ideas for a May gift. She wants 400 of them. She doesn't want to spend more than $30. I can totally help find that. So we're going to edit. And we're not going to go into building the thing, but I just want to show you guys how to get it there. And this is the same for any requisition you get that you want to bid out or have to bid out, right? You just come to the bottom after you hit edit and send to RFQ. It's going to ask you, do you want to start from scratch or do you want to use a template? In this case, this is promo. So we actually have a template that helps us select the right suppliers, include the right suppliers, and it has some helpful hints and reminders in there just in case you're new to doing promo sourcing events. So I'm going to select the template instead of starting from scratch, and I'm going to hit create, and it's going to pull that rec information into the sourcing event. And this is where we will start our next class 2 weeks from today when we go over sourcing events. So that is a bunch of information all at once about free text, but I hope that you guys saw there's a little bit of a repetitiveness to that in terms of just ask yourself the questions. Does this make sense? Is this correct? What should this be for? What is going to be the most efficient use of my time? How can I never see this requisition again? That's a question I ask myself a lot. So, what are your questions today? I hope we have some, you guys. No questions. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I will talk to you all in a couple weeks.